Hello, my friends, compañeros. Back with Blue Review, and as promised, I'm going to roll on with the Halloween 2021 selections. I'm going to shelve the ones that were new to me that I checked out on streaming services because I watched two venerable classics that I have on DVD, neither of which are on Blu-ray yet, but really desperately need to be. But I watched both of them in the last couple of days, and I hadn't seen either of them in a very long time. And I have to say, it was just an amazing reunion. So, without without further ado, chaos ensues here. Chaos reigns. Oh, by the way, this just happened to be here. This is a Baron Blood press book, Mario Bava's Baron Blood. So I think occasionally I'll show you guys some eBay stuff that I'm selling because I really need money. But you might find it interesting, even if you can't buy it. Anyway, this I think I'm selling for about $15 plus maybe $5 postage. But I'm willing to take offers. Not one of my favorite Bavas. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I did sell the poster, an original poster, for $80 recently. That was nice. I'll get that on Blu-ray one day because really Bava is kind of indispensable. I have like 5 Bavas on Blu-ray, and I'll probably review at least 2 of them before Halloween, by Halloween. So carrying on, the first thing I watched the other day was Freaks by Tod Browning, 1932, and that film I had not watched in quite a while for a very simple reason. My ex-wife, it was one of her favorite films. Now, I had bought the DVD when I worked at Borders Books and Music when it first came out in the 2000s. Had already been a fan for like 15 years. I used to watch it constantly on VHS in the 90s. But anyway, when we married 2010, she was like, we got to watch this. We watched it all the time, and we watched it every Halloween together. And then when she left me in 2015, she took that with me. Whoops. She took that with her. I didn't mind her taking ones that she bought or ones that I knew she was partial to. But my love affair with Freaks far predated her and my ownership of the DVD also. So I was a bit annoyed. She was such a, and my videos were in alphabetical order on the shelves. So in her odd frenzy to get Freaks, she also accidentally got Gambling City by Sergio Martino, which I'm sure then she immediately turned around and sold. But I'm like, what the hell? She never even watched the movie with me. That's my favorite Martino movie, and so I had to get that on DVD on No Shame, used as it was going out of print on eBay. Which I don't know when that's going to ever come out on Blu-ray. Maybe not too long, but I'm selling my No Shame DVDs. Their prices are kind of variable. My good buddy Sean Lee Levin got one of them, I think, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail in Chicago for an obscenely low price. I'm a little bit more greedy, so I'm going to price them a bit more. But right now, I'm pricing the Martino No Shames at about $25 each, which is a big step down from the fair market value, and I'm willing to go a little lower. Anyway, I didn't come to do the video to be like the Carnival Barker, so let me go on, unintended here, with Freaks. So I first saw Freaks in 1992. I had heard of it a good bit, and I had read, I think in one of the research books that I was collecting them, by Research, capital R, capital E, capital S, Search, incredible book series. It really kind of changed the culture, the landscape. They did incredibly strange films, incredibly strange music, modern primitives about, tattooing and body piercing. They had their finger in the heartbeat before, most of us even, knew there was a heartbeat. And they were out of San Francisco starting in the late 70s with a zine called Search and Destroy in the punk years. It was V. Vale and his partner / lover, Andrea Juno. Anyway, they went their separate ways later, and the whole publishing rights thing, I don't know where it's landed. I lost most of my research books in my last move in 2015. I reacquired a couple of them. I still had Incredibly Strange Films, but I didn't realize it. I thought I lost it too, so I ordered it on eBay. Anyway, I sold my extra copy. Probably quite a few of my friends watching this either have a copy of Incredibly Strange Films or, in their good taste, have um, read it. And actually, the quote on the back of the book is, the enemy of creativity is quote unquote good taste by Pablo Picasso. Quote. So anyway, um, so yeah, in those books, Freaks was talked about reverently, um, and I believe it was around that time that I read maybe about the efforts of Anton LaVey to restore Freaks in the 1960s, and I like it. Veggie chicken is in my key, and so that was kind of interesting. Now, what I learned later was that around the time I watched Freaks for the first time, I also watched the films that Anthony Balk, who did Horror Hotel, um, directed with William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen, Ian Somerville. Classic, trancy, cut up, non-linear, wild, crazy films. I love them. I've watched them probably more than is healthy for a human mind. Um, but Balk also was involved with the restoration of Freaks in the mid '60s with LaVey. I didn't know that at the time, so everything was kind of coming together for me in '92, '93, with all these connections and seeking out these books and movies and trying to learn as much as possible. It was an exciting time. But in any case, Freaks finally did end up on DVD. I think it might have been on VHS pre-record. I'm pretty sure I had a copy. I probably got around '97. Um, but yeah, I upgraded and watched that thing every Halloween. So anyway, then it was taken from me surreptitiously by the ex-partner, and I was sad. So anyway, it's streaming on. Is it? Where did I watch it? I watched it streaming, I believe, on, I don't know, HBO Max. Yes, my dear friend Kimberly Jones. Kimberly Jones. She has allowed me ingress to her HBO Max account so that I may join her family in watching great television like Titans and Doom Patrol. I'm not joking. I do think it's great television. Eventually, I'm going to cover those shows. They're ones that are always in my head somewhere wanting to do a Blue Review show on. But in any case, so I saw Freaks and I watched it the other night and it was just incredible. It's not a very long movie. It's a little over an hour. And I've seen Tod Browning's, I'd say about 5 of his films. I think I've seen Uncanny 3, one with something Zanzibar. I want another one too with Lon Chaney. And of course, Dracula, 1931, Bela Lugosi. I have to say, Freaks is his best made film of those 5. Most interesting, most compelling. I think it's a far better film than Dracula. I think Dracula is probably the weakest of those 5 films as far as just the appeal to me. And I'm a huge fan of the character Dracula, so don't get me wrong. Lugosi I also love, but he's not my favorite Dracula by a long shot. And there is some nice atmosphere early on in Dracula where Harker is coming in and getting kind of the tour from Dracula of his domain, his castle, and there's like no music or sound in the soundtrack. It's really creepy. Lighting's like very chiaroscuro, and I really didn't appreciate that much until I saw it a lot as a kid. I've never owned a copy, and I don't know if I still own a copy. I didn't have a copy until 2017 when my good friend Stephen Levin, Sean Lee Levin's father, gifted me with a copy of the complete Dracula Universal Films collection, and I watched those, and that was an incredible set. I put it up for sale on eBay, and to be honest, I can't remember if it's still over there for sale or it sold. So in any case, that's the only time I owned it, and it had all the Dracula Universal films, including the ones with John Carradine, and of course Dracula's Daughter, which I think is just fantastic, and the Spanish language Dracula, which I like a little better than the Lugosi one. They were filmed at the same time, same sets. But I gained a new appreciation of Browning's Dracula when I saw it remastered in high def on DVD. So one day maybe I will get it on Blu-ray. You know, it probably deserves a place in the library. It was one that, as a young child, very young child, I did love. And it spurred me to read the book Dracula by Bram Stoker at a really young age, which, you know, like Marvel Comics, helped spur my vocabulary. I mean, I had teachers who were like vehemently against comic books, and goodness knows they'd probably be against horror movies. They never actually said it that I remember. Um, but man, they were very educational. You know, Marvel did not write down to its readers, and to see those horror films at such a young age, uh, and then be spurred to read the literature from which it sprang, such as Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is my favorite of all of that cycle of novel. I think that's one of my favorite novels. Um, it was incredible. And to be honest, all roads lead to Marvel. I hate to say that, just for me personally. I know the MCU, y'all are probably tired of hearing about it, all the hype and stuff. And I know a lot of my friends are definitely not fans of the MCU. And then some are kind of lukewarm, some are fans, and some are kind of fanatics. And then there's occasionally a friend who thinks they can do no wrong. And I don't believe that at all, especially after watching Iron Man 3, Doctor Strange, and the Eternals trailer. Um, so my point is, though, I heard of the characters Dracula and Frankenstein from Marvel Comics. I first learned what a werewolf was from Marvel Comics, because in the early 70s there was this line of horror titles because the oppressive Comics Code Authority had finally been somewhat revised and opened up. Because a lot of us know that the Comics Code Authority was, you know, it was a witch hunt by Estes Kefauver in Congress, and had televised hearings in which William Gaines of EC, the biggest offender to them with a violent EC comics line, testified, and it was broadcast live on television. It's really strange to think about. It was way before my time, but fascinating. They turned a lot of the nation against comic books. Probably my dad was probably one of them, because he loved science fiction comic strips like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, but he really wasn't fond of comic books. I mean, he even had the first Action Comics. It came out when he was about 15. And he's like, God damn it, I wish I'd hold on to that. And I'm like, God damn, I wish you had to. Um, but he did tell me, my dad, in his infinite wisdom, well, it was rather finite, but he did tell me, you know, hold on to those comic books. Maybe they'll be worth something one day. That's the only good thing about them. And you know what? Finally it happened. So now I'm selling like I'm selling at least 50% of my entire comic book collection. Um, and maybe more. So, and I'm finding that this is good. And I'm thanking the MCU because they popularized so many of those characters that I have first appearances of, that I diligently collected through the 1970s and 1980s. That they've been sitting in boxes for 25 years, and now they're in great condition, and people want the first appearances of these characters. They might be disappointed when they see how different some of them are from the movie incarnations, like Shang-Chi. I sold a battered copy of his first appearance. I got it for $1 or $2 in 1988, 87, 86. Yes, me and my friend JJ were both obsessed with two comics that we'd find in the 3 for $1 bins, and we both got almost complete collections of Commandy and Shang-Chi. Now I'm pronouncing it the way Marvel does. And Shang-Chi inspired a Flickr Street character of mine called Liao Jun Kim Liao, a half Chinese, half Korean Zen Buddhist martial artist. And I gotta say, he's probably closer to Shang-Chi that I grew up with than the version that now is going to be popularized through the movies. But anyway, regardless, yeah, I sold a beat-up copy of his first appearance, Shang-Chi's first appearance, for, I believe, $275 at least. That helped a lot. Anyway, I'm on a million tangents. Freaks. So, Tod Browning, he got a lot of flack during making this movie. There was controversy. He used real freaks. I mean, I know it's politically incorrect to call them freaks anymore, but they were called them freaks of nature. There were examples of teratoma, I believe is what it's called. Teratology is like, I think, the study of deformities, human deformities. my more intelligent friends can correct me or embellish that. And but in the 30s, it was still big business, um, and that's how these people survived. You know, people who would be considered severely handicapped now, and really kept away from the populace. You know, to look at because that's how humans and Americans especially are. Um, you know, we don't want people to see our outcasts, even if they aren't deformed physically, but definitely if they are handicapped, deformed, what have you. And of course, eugenics, which you know we won't get into that, but human eugenics has improved so much as far as um, just basically we weeded out, not we, me and you, but scientists, whoever, breeders, I don't know, nature itself, God, whatever. I don't believe in God, but have since the time of the movie Freaks, that's been almost 90 years, have weeded out a lot of the genetic deformities and birth defects, mutations, etc., that were prevalent still in the 1930s. Were very prevalent, probably prior to the industrial age and advanced medicine and stuff. So but they were still in existence in the 30s, and these people would have to live totally on the fringes of society now. You're in like I was going to say mental institution, but Ronald Reagan shut those down and put those people in the street, but they would probably be living on the street. So, and I used to see people in the mid 80s downtown with, missing limbs and such. Some of them were veterans, but some of them were born that way, and they were pretty much living on the streets. Um, but these people banded together under the carnival banner and as performers in which they showed off, if you want to put it that way, displayed their deformities, their uniqueness. They were like special, and the midgets in the circus, midgets are different than dwarves. Dwarfism, there's some deformity and out of proportion with limbs and your facial features. Midgets, which I don't know, I haven't seen a real, and that's probably a politically incorrect word to say now. I don't know. I was called midget quite a lot when I was a kid because I had below average height. I'm still only 5'2.5", which when I was a kid, medically that was not a midget, but it was darn close for a male average height. So I liked midgets, and they're called little people now, and but I don't see many. I do see dwarfs quite a bit. They've kind of integrated into the fabric of society the best, I think, of all of those marginalized people who were born that way, And but in this film, Freaks, the two stars, I consider them the two stars, are Harry Earls and his sister Frida. I mean, sorry, that's a character, and his sister Daisy Earls. So this is brother and sister, and in the movie they're playing lovers who are going to get married, and they are like really popular in the circus and well loved. Um, I don't know how tall they are. I'd say probably 3 feet maybe. But they're not tiny, but they're not as tall as me. But it's not saying much. But unfortunately, the circus mostly is these freaks, so to speak. And in the beginning of the movie, there's a barker who's displaying one of the human oddities somewhere, and that's kind of the framing wraparound sequence for the film, which and it was also adapted by the aforementioned Burroughs, Geis, and Anthony Balk films. The text of what he's saying, which is, they did not ask to come into the world, but into the world they came. Their code is a law unto themselves. Offend one and you offend them all. And now, if you'll step this way, ladies and gentlemen, we'll introduce you to the most, whatever, monstrosity of all time. She was once a beautiful woman. I think my delivery is more like the William Burroughs than the actual guy in the movie. The guy in the movie really kind of said it like, not with much gusto compared to Burroughs. But anyway, she was once a beautiful woman. That's how Burroughs said it. We don't see her though until the end of the movie. That's the shock reveal. So Harry and Daisy play Hans and Frida, and Hans is like an heir to a fortune. So he's different than the other freaks. He has some income to fall back on. but he hasn't completely taken his place in that world yet. He's still part of the carnival world, and Frida is madly in love with him, and he with her. But he becomes infatuated with Cleopatra, who's the, I forgot what they called her, the Empress of the Air or something, because she does the, acrobatics with those little things. I forgot what they're called. Like in like Robin, the Flying Graysons, and it's like which that is featured a lot on the Titan show. Flashbacks to that kind of aerial, those kind of aerial feats that used to be popular. But anyway, that's what she does, and she's kind of an arrogant European kind of bitch. And I got to be frank, the actress is god awful. I mean, her accent is. I mean, people make fun of Bela Lugosi's accent, but sometimes, but he could act seriously. Hers is just accent without any good articulation or elocution. It's terrible. But anyway, I mean, you can overlook it, and because her character's unlikable. So I mean, you don't need to like anything about her. She's allegedly so beautiful. Then there's like Venus, who's like an actual beautiful blonde woman, and I think she's marketed as the beautiful one, and she's way more beautiful than Cleopatra, but she is also very modest and humble and sweet. And of course, though, her flaw was being attracted to the bad boy, the circus strongman, Hercules, and I don't remember the names of these last couple actors. But anyway, she dumps him, and she gradually gets a love affair going with Froso, the clown. So Froso and Venus and Cleopatra and Hercules are all played by regular human actors, non freaks, what have you. Um, and I don't know what became of any of these actors. I mean, the Hercules actor, he's kind of marginally too, and he also has a strong accent. But like I said, it kind of adds to the fact you're supposed to hate these characters because that's really the engine that drives you toward the amazing final scene. So, but the actors who did Froso and Daisy are great. I'm for Daisy. Froso and Venus are great. Um, and yeah, but really, I think the Earls are really the stars. And then featured are all these other different real life freaks, basically playing themselves. And there's like Johnny Eck, a guy who has no lower part of his body, and sometimes I see people like that from back then, and he walks around in his hands, and I'm not sure, does he have genitals? I mean, how does he go to the bathroom? Or are they just kind of tucked up in there and it's really just that he doesn't have legs? That's always bothered me or fascinated me anyway. Um, but he was kind of the most famous guy shaped like that. And there's the Daisy and I forgot the Hilton sisters, who are conjoined Siamese twins, and they're joined by on the side of their bodies, but each of their bodies is fully formed, but they can't get apart. And back then, there really wasn't as much surgery to separate conjoined twins as there later became. And conjoined twins still exist to various states. And some are shocking. Parasitic twins sometimes still are born, and that's usually taken care of in surgery when the person is an infant. And a movie that I did see on streaming that everyone's kind of crazy about right now, that I'm going to review very soon, was the James Wan's *Malignant*. And I'm giving away the shock twist, but it involves the conjoined twin. So anyway, it's well done, I think. And I don't like James Wan that much, but it's kind of like his masterpiece or whatever. Um, anyway, the Hilton sisters, Siamese twins have a long history connected to where I live, which is in North Carolina. Like Chang and Ing, the original Siamese twins, they settled down in their older life and married non-Asian women and lived in the mountains in North Carolina. Some of their descendants still live around here. The Hilton sisters actually moved to Charlotte in their late life, and they were, for a time, and I can't remember what decade this was, maybe the 50s or early 60s. My good friend Tim McLean, he can probably, expound on all this way better than me, but pretty sure they worked at a place called Park and Shop, this old grocery store that's kind of way far from here on this stretch of highway called Independence Boulevard. And wow, that was pretty wild. So I don't know where they died. Maybe they died here. I used to know, but I've kind of forgotten. Anyway, they're in this movie, and one of them is dating this stuttering weird guy. He's not deformed. He's just kind of an idiot. And I don't mean that in a mean way. He's just, he's an obnoxious character. And I don't know if he really stammers or if that's acting, but it's played for a very broad 1930s, film humor. Some of which is now wince-inducing, but some of which, of course, like the Marx Brothers and such, are brilliant. Um, but yeah, he's dating one of the two sisters, but not the other. But when he kisses her, the other one can feel it, and then that was true in real life. They could. So I'm, back then, you think about the stuff, and you're like, one of them gets married, so they're having sex on their honeymoon. The other one's there, just feeling it, probably enjoying it, but being like, wow, how do I get away from this? But I don't think they try to get away. I mean, the thing about conjoined twins, especially ones who share significantly more body parts than just like some flesh or a band of flesh like Chang and Ing did, um, I think they're really tied together, on a profound psychic level. And there's a two-headed girl, which are conjoined twins, who's living now, and I constantly forget her name, but it's easy to search her under conjoined twins. She's probably the most famous modern conjoined twin, and at first glance, yes, it looks like one body with two heads. Um, but even they have different personalities, but they read each other's minds, like literally read each other's minds, even though they don't share a brain, of course. Um, that's just fascinating. One of the books, research books I had, was called Freaks, and it was all about teratology and all of this. And unfortunately, that's one I lost, but will one day replace. And I've got to admit, a lot of those photos still bother me. I mean, they're disturbing. They're kind of gross, and that's not denigrating to people themselves. But I was fascinated with this at an early age because of the Elephant Man came out when I was a kid, and I immediately went to my elementary school library and started researching Frederick Treves' book called The Elephant Man and the photos in it. And he looks exactly the same in the movie. Lynch had the makeup guys do him to perfection. But he, looking at him now, I don't know about if I met him in real life, but I mean, looking at him in pictures or a representation of him in Lynch's film, it doesn't gross me out whatsoever. And I found him to be a noble man. And I mean, how could you live like that and live the life he did? But he managed to find some beauty and artistry in his life, as brief and painful as it was. So he's always been one of my heroes, kind of in a weird way. And I think that put me on the path, even though back then a lot of the photos of so-called freaks of nature really did disturb me deeply. But there are still some that really disturb me, I will admit. Nobody depicted in this film disturbs me personally. A couple of them might disturb some of you guys, or maybe not, but somebody, I'm sure. And at the time, it was disturbing and controversial, and they kind of fucked with Browning over finishing the movie and the cut of the movie and all this other stuff. But he finally completed it. I don't know if it was, from what I understand, it's kind of a flop. At least put in relief against Dracula of his a year earlier, which was a worldwide blockbuster. Before there were blockbusters. And like I said, Freaks is an infinitely better film. I already told you the setup. And basically, this Cleopatra chick tries to poison little Hans, and I'm not being patronizing. I'm little too, and get his fortune. And this kind of a pot boiler story that was common back then. It's common now. Even on soap operas. Not as common when I was a kid. It was all over. That kind of stuff was all over soap operas. Gradually poisoning them to get the inheritance. Nowadays people do that in real life constantly, to get people's life insurance policies, because I watch all those true crime channels on YouTube. In any case, the freaks figure out what's going on. This plot by Hercules and Cleopatra, who are in fact lovers, behind Hans's back. Hans has dumped Frida for this woman, and she's kind of a tragic character, Frida. And anyway, they, finally Hans figures out what's up, and he conspires with the freaks, and it's all done very, very well. A lot of it is done without dialogue, a lot of it without music, and you kind of, the way the freaks, their expressions toward each other while they're kind of, when you figure it out, they're plotting to destroy Hercules and Cleopatra, and then you have this frightening ending where they're in a wagon going to another town and there's a rainstorm. A couple of the wagons turn over, and then Hercules is coming out of the wagon and there's in the rain, there's the freaks coming. It's just classic shots, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. A lot of them strongly influenced the artist Bernie Wrightson, one of the great comic book horror artists who I used to know. My ex-wife was actually friends with him. Rest in peace, Bernie. And there are some pictures in those early Swamp Things that are very, very obviously influenced by some shots in Freaks. But yeah, so like you said, their code is a law unto themselves, not the most grammatically correct sentence. Offend one and you offend them all. And they offended them all, so yeah, they meet a horrible end. And then you see Cleopatra, Empress of the Air, and that I guess they've, basically sawed her in half and tarred and feathered her, so she's like the human chicken now. And I guess she lost her mind too because she's squawking. And wow, okay. So I love this movie. I think it's appropriate for Halloween because it's just very interesting looking real people who were just wild looking in real life. They didn't have to dress up or wear a costume. And I'd marginally call it horror because of the scenes like toward the end of the movie that are very noir and very dark, disturbing, violent. Not gore shown or anything, but definitely there's some sadism. And this was right before the Hays Code. This movie maybe couldn't have been made with the Hays Code that started in '33 in Hollywood. I mean, this was the days when you still had some nudity and other kind of tawdry elements in movies, and there was no real regulation. And then the prudes took over. The same people, not the same people, but the same mentality that went after marijuana with reefer madness and outlawed alcohol. So we see how many problems those things saw. How many problems were solved by those incredible policies. So yeah, I would call it horror because it has that, and especially of its time, it had that reputation of being horrific and shocking. And a lot of people probably were gasping at the freaks, like the people who see them at carnivals, and maybe they didn't treat them as real human people. But I think this movie really humanizes them. I think it's brilliant, and the best modern story on film, which doesn't, to my recall, does feature one real life freak as a star. One of the main stars was Carnival, the HBO series. Brilliant series, heavily influenced by Twin Peaks, and the co-stars of the top stars. The co-star was Michael Anderson, who does suffer from dwarfism, and of course he's known worldwide, iconically as the Man from Another Place or the Arm from the original series and Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, the film. Him and Lynch had a giant falling out, and he did not end up in the Return. He was replaced by a kind of strange tree with electricity and a weird head. But it's still the Arm. But I mean, in the lodge, everything's supernatural, and like they turned Bowie into a giant, teacup, and but within that world, that makes sense. It all makes sense. But anyway, before all that, bad blood happened with Anderson, he did star in Freaks, the 2 seasons that aired, and he was Samson, and he was incredible. He was incredible. That was a very dark show, a very interesting show, very deep. It had a lot of historical flavor to it. It also had a lot of kind of under the surface, kind of occult, esoteric kind of qualities. But it was canceled, before it could be finished, just like Twin Peaks was. So anyway, I recommend that. I recommend Twin Peaks, of course. I've done 2 videos here on it, but I recommend Carnival. Maybe one day I'll talk about it if I ever get the set. I'm not. I don't think the set's on Blu-ray yet, but it is on HBO Max, so I'll probably rewatch it in the near future. So the next film, so I don't run over long, is ALUCARDA. ALUCARDA, it's a Mexican film from 1977. Pretty infamous film, which really has kind of gained a lot of traction in recent years. It's definitely horror, to put it mildly. Director Juan Lopez Moctezuma, he was part of this kind of circle called the Panic Movement, who were kind of like these experimental artists kind of like the Austrian actionists of the 50s to 70s, though they weren't as violent and out of control, and grotesque in their performances, and also comb transmissions were Genesis P. Orridge of Psychic TV and Throbbing Gristle began, and also Cozy Fanny Tootie later in Throbbing Gristle. Comb Transmissions was their project, and it was also extreme performance art from the late 60s to the mid 70s. So this was kind of in that period and in that vein. Other members of the Panic movement were Fernando Arrabal, who mined kind of similar territory to Moctezuma, Alejandro Jodorowsky, and of course we all know who that is, I hope. I did a video of him, the golden box set that came out, El Topo, Holy Mountain, one of the masters of cinema of all time, and the leading authority on tarot in the world, and a comic book writer, and a self-help guy, guru. So anyway, he's somebody I would like to meet one day, but he's like 90, so I don't know if that will happen. And then also Roland Topor, who I don't know a lot about, but he did write the novel The Tenant. I guess he went a little more relatively mainstream. He wrote the novel The Tenant that Polanski adapted and starred in. He also wrote Fantastic Planet or La Planète Sauvage, incredible animated sci-fi film of the 70s, also huge cult movie now. I have that on Blu-ray with Criterion, and I certainly intend to review it eventually. So anyway, that's kind of what the Panic thing was. And so, this stuff, these crazy Mexican creators and filmmakers, of course, they were a huge influence on Guillermo del Toro, and he has championed them a lot. He's interviewed on this DVD. This is a Mondo Macabro DVD. So why hasn't Mondo Macabro put this movie out on Blu-ray yet? The prevalent rumor is that the original masters that were used for the DVD are lost. I don't know, how could you lose Alucarda, man? I mean, they've got like Mystics in Bali, what the hell? Oh, I don't know if that's on Blu-ray yet either. But think of the ones, many they have on Blu-ray. I mean, if you can rescue Franco Center, you need to fucking rescue Alucarda, man. So, Alucarda is, I would put it in a category of satanic, occult films, dark magic, and there's some vampirism in it and other kind of undead characters. Essentially, within the plot, it's a outgrowth of the novel Dracula. The character Lucy Westenra, who in the book was vampirized and became known as the Bloofer Girl and stalked London and mainly sucked on and ate children. In this continuity, created by the director Moctezuma, he posits her as apparently he sets Dracula 100 years before it was actually set. So he sets Lucy as having died and being interred in Mexico in 1815. So I don't know, But anyway, of course, if you know who Lucy Westenra is, then you have that little, connection, that kind of flavor. She dies giving birth. Well, she gives birth to a child who's taken away by this really crazy gypsy hunchback character played by Claudio Broke, a really big Mexican actor who was later in Del Toro's films, and several other genre films of note. But Kronos, he was in as an older man. Great actor. He plays two different characters in this movie. One is the satyr-like character who takes the baby, and Lucy's there, and you hear these foul sounds and these shadows. It's very atmospheric, and it's very rustic and baroque, and kind of, the sets, they're just, they're very minimalist. They're very they look very dusty and dirty, and I don't know, he creates an incredible atmosphere, the lighting and the smoke and the cobwebs, and I don't know, it's quite a tableau. It's a world that he's created that's fascinating and frightening at the same time, but also very entertaining because anyway, this crazy voice, not really saying any words, comes upon Lucy, and she kind of screams, and that's the end of her. Um, my thought was that this thing that kills her is also the father of her child. Different people have speculated if Dracula is the father of her child, is that the implication? Um, is it Satan? That's a strong implication in the movie itself. Um, I wrote a short story where I speculated that Maldoror, the character from Comte de Lautremont's novel, was the father. So anyway, in any case, it's a very evil demonic presence. So Alucarda grows up like an orphanage, a nunnery, uh, convent, and she meets a new addition to the convent team, student, and her name's Justine, and Alucarda is played by Tina Romero, and she is one of the most over the top, scene stealing, intense, riveting actresses I've ever seen. She's small in stature, huge, long black hair, and a kind of a Victorian dark dress, even though this takes place before Victorian era, and just her accent's incredible. And this was shot in English. I mean, and so she's like Justine, and she's so dramatic. It's just this whole movie. The beginning's kind of dramatic, but it's still kind of a basic horror setup. And once just Alucarda pops up, as Justine is looking, over her new room in the convent, and you hear, hello. And then you see Alucarda is like jump, surprising behind her. And from then to the end of the movie, she is the hammiest ham. And I mean that in the best possible way. She is completely over the top. All of her actions, her gestures, her voice, her dialogue. It's just, I laugh my ass off through this whole movie every time I've watched it, and I've seen it many times. The last time I watched it prior to last night was, sad memory, but happy to, was in 2019, with my ex-fiance a few days before she left town and ended our engagement. And she liked it. We had an afternoon where we watched Alucarda, Holy Mountain, which she had seen before, and she's uh, a tarot reader, so it was fascinating to her. And we watched one other wild movie, I don't remember what it was, and we watched the William Burroughs shorts that I mentioned earlier. Um, and Alucard is just, she might have thought I was flipping out because there's so much energy in that movie. Um, I don't know, it's just nonstop. And the nuns kind of dress like mummies. They have like these swaddlings over their head. You see their face, but then the white kind of bandages all over their bodies. And there's this like really hypocritical, weird, perverted fat priest guy. And then Claudio Broke is his other role than the kind of satyr-like character who's kind of the motivator, the inciting incident character for Justine and Alucarda to get into black magic together. His other character is this doctor, and he's like, "This is not the 15th century. This is disgusting." And because basically they're hysterical, they're crazy, this is very strongly influenced by like the Devils and Mark of the Devil and that whole wave, Killer Nun, whatever, the Cloistered Convent movie by Franco, and then there's another one by another, Love Letters to a Portuguese Nun. The whole kind of nuns and priests and what do you call it? Witch hunts, torture. Witchfinder General with Vincent Price came a little before. I think it might have come after the Devils too. The Devils really was to me the progenitor of that whole subgenre, and it thrived for quite a number of years, at least in other countries than America. And this is definitely a product of that cycle. But also, it's like a hardcore Satanism occult film too, and just a straight out supernatural horror because it does have these kind of allusions to Dracula and everything. There's a lot of religious criticism of religion, of Catholicism, of course, especially. So it's a very anti-clerical movie, which a lot of Mexican and Spanish filmmakers in the 70s were incredibly anti-clerical. Of course, probably Luis Buñuel being the most well known for that. And he had incisive, just razor sharp satire against Catholicism in most all his movies. But the 70s, as the 70s Spanish movies were there was a lot of political subtext because of the reign of Generalissimo Francisco Franco, no relation to Jess Franco. The Mexican ones had a lot of anti-Catholicism in them. So, um, basically, they feel like Justine is getting possessed, and so of course they strip her down and they put her on a cross, but it's like a Y cross, and she's tortured with these, basically just keep sticking needles into her skin, and she's naked and bleeding, and obviously this is like a totally adult and over the top film. This is the 70s. Everyone was naked in these kind of movies, completely naked, and anything could happen. And that's what's exciting about them. That era is kind of over, though there are waves, again, mostly in foreign countries. Like the movie Titan is a good example, the new French Extremity, where that kind of breaking of all those barriers is going on again, and it's refreshing, and I love it. I'm not saying the quality of all these films is the same, or all these filmmakers think they're a cohesive movement in any of these cases, but it's just exciting. That kind of filmmaking is exciting to me personally, where you never know what's going to happen next, or anything could happen next, and invariably does happen, and it then gets even crazier. You're ending up not watching the same movie you started with. To me, that's just incredible storytelling. Just very taboo busting, pushing the envelope, experimenting, and that's really what the Panic movement was really about. Was doing that within the context of the arts, especially film. And Araball's movies are far more extreme than Moctezuma's movies. Moctezuma also did the brilliant Mansion of Madness, which also was on Mondo Macabro on DVD. I did sell my copy. I had two copies, and I did sell them both. I think for about $60 or $70 each. I believe they're out of print, and that's based on Edgar Allan Poe's story, the Professor Tar and Dr. Feather, or Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, or whatever. And that's not the title, but their names are in the title. And there was a dubbed English version, though the other one was shot in English too, the original, just like Alucarda, and had Claudio Broke too, and he's like the villain, and basically the English version that's kind of, I think, redubbed and cut was playing in like drive-ins and such as Dr. Tar's Torture Dungeon, but that's Mansion of Madness, another great one. But I mean, it's a great film, unique. It also has a great look and atmosphere, this kind of baroque, kind of magical realism, kind of tableau to it. But it's not on the level of Alucarda, because nothing can really duplicate Tina Romero's just endless screaming at the top of her lungs and declarations of, blasphemy and Satan, 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 and then she starts invoking several demonic entities, and she just gets more dramatic, and she's like, Beelzebub, Astaroth. No, she's like, Beelzebub, Belphegor, Astaroth, and she repeats their three names over and over, louder and louder. And part of them takes her clothes off, and she's got a dagger. It's insane. And so Beelzebub, Belphegor, Astaroth, Beelzebub, Belphegor, Astaroth. And she's really like that through the movie. I mean, I can't really truly. I mean, I could, because I live alone and pretty good, privacy in here. I could really act it out at the volume it really is in the movie, but I don't know. You guys would probably just think I'm completely out of control and never watch one of my videos again. Or you might be like, hey man, you should be in a black metal band, because the vocal she's insane, and in a great way. And but yeah, and there's a lot of, this movie was sampled a lot by industrial bands in the 80s and 90s. And I heard the samples way back then. It took me many years. I finally saw Alucarda and hear where they come from. But a really famous one is, and this is what the devil does, and that's sampled in My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, and I believe it's their song The Devil Does Drugs, I think is the name of the song. But there's other, they sampled a ton of other things from this movie and similar movies, like You've Been Found Guilty of Commerce with the Devil, which can't remember if that's from Alucarda or The Devils or a similar movie. I never quite get that right. Um, but it's always fun seeing cult movies in the 2000s and 90s and 2000s and learning where these, great samples came from in these albums. But that's a story for another day. We could talk about that for an hour. Um, Suffice to say, Justine is killed, and her and Alucarda kind of had an instant karma, instant love at first sight, and their affair, which of course that's taboo in and of itself, being lesbians in a convent in 1815, and they are just bonded together, and it's so intense. Alucarda, like, immediately, within like the first hour of meeting, I love you so much, Justine. It's like, I want us to be together always. And she starts talking about death, and Justine's like, "Oh no, this is frightening, Alucarda. Why this thing with death?" But and then she has these philosophical homilies and aphorisms, kind of like El Topo. Um, she has this little box where these little bugs. She keeps these bugs like ladybugs, and she goes, "It's a box of secrets. We all have boxes of secrets." And she's an indelible fucking character. That's why I wrote 3 different stories and treatments about her for perspective short stories and comic books I was going to do, but none of them got realized. But in the 2000s, I was quite the Alucarda nut, and kind of still am, but not where I'm creating Alucarda fanfic basically anymore. So Alucarda wreaks bloody revenge on these nuns for killing her girl, and Claudio's over here as the doctor, and he's trying to calm everybody down and save them. And of course, his dialogue is a strong condemnation of the Catholic Church. And the priest is kind of a pervert, but he's like he bellows, and he's real kind of bloviating. But likable actor. I mean, he really is well done. And then Angelica, the nun who really loves Justine, I think maybe loves her kind of like Alucarda does. She's actually a very pretty woman under her mummy outfit, and she dies too. And then of course Alucarda goes amok completely and burns the entire convent down. There's big crucifix, a giant Christ crucifix on the wall, wooden, and it burns, and all the candles burn, and she's just amid the fire, and then she's finally herself kind of reduced, seemingly like maybe to dust, but it's real abrupt to where she kind of disappears. Like when Justine is fine, because Justine comes back to life as an undead who seems kind of like a vampire, and naked and covered in blood and ravenous. And when they kill her, there's some really well done dissolves for that time of her gradually going from her regular form to skeleton and dust. They came a long way since the days of the Lugosi Draculas and the Christopher Lee Draculas effects wise. But Alucarda, she disappears pretty damn fast. There's no kind of gradual degradation, and then the skin sloughing off her bones, and the bones sticking out and being all that's left, and then maybe dust. She kind of goes pretty much from just her being kind of unconscious to dust. So did she really die? I don't know. But the nunnery is burning, and that's it. And classic film, totally insane, over the top, and I mean that in the best way possible. This movie has, I don't know. I wish I had the energy of Alucarda. I mean, I wish I was that intense. I mean, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have any friends, but or lovers. But then again, might have more. I don't know. But I'm not beautiful like Tina Romero. But she's iconic. A lot of the images from not only the dialogue and certain shots from Alucarda, but the imagery from like the posters and promotional materials with Alucarda, kind of a stark chiaroscuro like drawing of her with an upside down red, that's black and white, with an upside down red cross. It's pretty damn iconic, and it's inspired like metal bands and all kinds of things, other films, of course, and like I said, Del Toro and other filmmakers. So anyway, I want to wrap this up. I didn't want to go over an hour ever again, or at least not for a while if I could help it. After this movie length Shang-Chi video I did, that was an hour and 40 minutes. I want to apologize to you guys for going on so long about it. But I do think it was a good video because I explored every possible angle to the Shang-Chi phenomenon. Uh, so anyway, I didn't feel the need to do that with these two movies, but I tried to touch on some things, some influences on them, and then some things that were influenced by them, and put them in a context. And I'm always trying to do that. And it's easier when I've seen a movie as many times as I have Freaks and ALUCARDA. It's just like old friends. It's like I don't really need to get on Google and cheat like I do with some of these movies I see for the first time on streaming. Anyway, let's hope and pray that they will both arrive in glittering Blu-ray editions in 2022. I'll be back with more Halloween mania. I've got a couple special surprises, my streaming selections, and some more classics as we hurtle toward the greatest holiday there is. So take care. Thank you so much.